The letter that changed everything, it started with a fence. Tom Harris never expected that fixing an old broken fence on a rainy night would lead to a letter that would change his entire life. He was a man running on empty, a single father drowning in long hours and quiet grief, convinced that surviving was the best he could do. But then Martha Callahan, his elderly, sharp-witted neighbor, handed him a simple envelope. "Read it when you have time," she had said. He didn't think much of it at first. Just another kind. Old woman offering words of encouragement. But when he finally opened it, what he found inside wasn't just a letter. It was a lifeline, a message that saw right through him. And those words. They set off a chain of events that would prove kindness doesn't just change lives. It keeps on going. This is the story of how one letter saved a man, a boy, and a stranger he had never met. And maybe, just maybe, it will change something. In you too. If you believe in the power of small kindnesses, if you love stories that stay with you long after they end, then you won't want to miss this journey. So hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning. Stories like these deserve to be told, and you deserve to hear them. Let's dive in. A struggling dad's act of kindness led to a life-changing surprise from his elderly neighbor. The rain had been relentless for hours, hammering against the cracked sidewalks and overflowing gutters of the quiet suburban neighborhood. Tom Harris pulled his worn-out jacket tighter around his shoulders as he stepped out of his old delivery truck, the engine sputtering before shutting down completely. His body ached, not just from another grueling 14-hour shift, but from the weight of exhaustion that had settled deep into his bones over the past 2 years. He glanced at the dimly lit windows of his modest house, knowing that Jake, his 10-year-old son, was likely asleep by now. Guilt gnawed at him. Another day where he barely saw his boy. Another day where work had stolen precious time. He sighed, rubbing his calloused hands together for warmth before trudging toward the front door. Then he noticed it. The wooden fence separating his property from his elderly neighbors had collapsed in the storm. Several planks lay scattered on the rain-soaked grass, while others hung precariously from rusted nails. The sight made him frown. Martha. She was in her 70s, frail but independent. Tom often saw her tending to her small garden in the mornings, her hands dirt-stained yet precise, as if each flower and plant had a purpose. She rarely asked for help, always insisting she could handle things on her own. But this was too much for her to fix alone. His first instinct was to go inside, to collapse on the couch and let his exhaustion win. He had barely slept in days, trying to juggle overtime shifts just to make ends meet. But something about the broken fence gnawed at him. Then he saw her. Martha was outside in the drizzle, wrapped in a thin cardigan, struggling to lift one of the heavy wooden planks. Her movements were slow, her hands trembling with effort. "Damn it," Tom muttered under his breath. Without thinking, he walked over. "Mrs. Callahan, what are you doing out here?" he asked, his voice gruff from fatigue. She looked up, surprised. Deep wrinkles lined her face, but her blue eyes were sharp and full of quiet strength. "Oh, Tom," she said, brushing a damp strand of silver hair from her forehead. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. Just got home from work." He eyed the fallen fence. "This is a mess." Martha chuckled dryly. "Tell me about it. Storm got the better of it, I suppose." Tom exhaled, shaking his head. "You shouldn't be out here in this weather." "I'll manage." She tried to lift another board, but her grip faltered. Tom stepped forward, easily taking it from her hands. "No, you won't," he said firmly. "Go inside, Martha. I'll fix it." She hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Tom, I can't ask you to do that. You've got enough on your plate." "You're not asking," he interrupted. "I'm offering." For a moment, she simply studied him. Then, with a small sigh, she nodded. "All right," she conceded. "But at least let me bring you some coffee." Tom smirked. "Deal." As she shuffled inside, Tom rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The rain had let up, but the ground was still damp beneath his boots. He grabbed his old toolbox from his shed and began reinforcing the fence, hammering nails into place, securing what he could before replacing the rotted planks. It wasn't a quick fix, but it would hold for now. With each swing of the hammer, something inside him eased. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just working to survive. He was helping someone, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. An hour later, Martha returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, her frail hands steady as she handed him one. "You're a good man, Tom," she said softly. He chuckled, taking a sip. The coffee was strong, black, just how he liked it. "Not sure about that," he admitted. Martha tilted her head. "You remind me of my husband. He always put others first, too." Tom didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, he focused on his work, securing the last plank into place. When he finally stepped back, assessing his handiwork, Martha smiled. "It looks good as new." "It'll hold," Tom said, wiping his brow. Martha hesitated, then reached to her cardigan pocket. "I want you to have this," she said, handing him a small folded letter. Tom frowned. "What is it?" "Just something I wrote," she said vaguely. "For you." A flicker of curiosity sparked in his tired mind, but before he could ask more, she patted his arm. "Read it when you have time." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "All right." As he walked back to his house, letter tucked into his pocket. He didn't think much of it. It was just a note, after all. A thank you, maybe. Nothing more. Little did he know that letter would change everything. Tom Harris barely noticed the letter in his pocket as he stepped inside his dimly lit home. The warmth of the heater barely touched the chill that clung to his bones after working all day in the cold. His muscles ached from exhaustion, and all he wanted was to collapse onto the worn-out couch in his living room. But first, he checked on Jake. His 10-year-old son was curled up under a thick blanket, his small chest rising and falling steadily. A single bedside lamp cast a soft glow over his face, highlighting the peaceful innocence of childhood, something Tom had been fighting to protect ever since his wife Lisa passed away. He exhaled, his exhaustion momentarily replaced by something else. Guilt. Another day where he barely saw his son. Another day where Jake ate dinner alone. Another day where the weight of responsibility pressed heavier on Tom's shoulders. He brushed a strand of hair from the boy's forehead, then quietly left the room. Back in the living room, Tom sank onto the couch, rubbing his tired eyes. His boots were still damp from the rain, and his clothes smelled of sawdust and sweat. That was when he felt the letter in his pocket. Frowning, he pulled it out. The envelope was simple, with his name scrawled in careful, old-fashioned cursive. Tom. Nothing else, no return address, no extra markings. He turned it over, debating whether to open it now. He should probably read it. Martha had seemed so insistent, but his eyelids were already heavy. "Tomorrow," he muttered, tossing the letter onto the coffee table. Within minutes, he was asleep. A loud beeping sound jolted Tom awake. He groaned, rubbing his face as he reached for his phone. 6:15 a.m., his alarm. The couch cushions had left creases on his cheek, and his back protested as he sat up. Across the room, the letter still sat on the coffee table, unopened. Tom barely glanced at it before standing. He had no time for letters. Within the hour, he was back in his truck, sipping cheap gas station coffee as he drove to his first delivery stop. The morning was cold, the roads slick with rain from the night before. His route took him across town, stopping at houses, offices, and warehouses, carrying heavy boxes from the back of his truck to doorsteps. It was monotonous work, but it paid the bills. By midday, his phone buzzed. Jake. "Hey, Dad, did you see the letter Mrs. Callahan gave you?" Tom smirked, shaking his head. Of course Martha had gotten to Jake. He typed back, "Not yet, buddy. Been busy." Jake. "She said you should read it soon." Tom exhaled, rubbing his temple. The kid was persistent. "Fine, I'll read it tonight." But even as he made that promise, he knew it was a lie. By the time Tom pulled into his driveway, it was nearly 9 p.m. Another long day. The house was quiet when he walked in, except for the sound of cartoons playing in Jake's room. He knew his son stayed up late waiting for him, something that made Tom's heart ache more than he liked to admit. But right now, All he wanted was a shower and sleep. He barely even looked at the letter. As he walked past the coffee table, it wasn't until a knock at the door startled him that he paused. He turned, frowning. It was late. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? Peering through the window, he saw Martha standing outside, wrapped in her thick cardigan. Tom quickly opened the door. "Mrs. Callahan, is everything all right?" She smiled, but there was something different about her tonight. Something softer. "I was just out for a walk," she said. "Saw your lights on." Tom arched an eyebrow. "It's pouring rain." Martha chuckled. Old habits die hard. Then her gaze flickered to the coffee table. The letter was still there, untouched. She sighed. "You haven't read it yet?" Tom rubbed the back of his neck. "I meant to. Just been busy." She studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "I understand. But Tom, sometimes we don't realize how much we need to hear certain words until it's almost too late." Her voice held an edge of urgency, something that made Tom uneasy. Before he could ask more, she patted his arm gently. "Read it when you can." Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain. Tom watched her go, an unfamiliar knot forming in his chest. When he closed the door, his gaze drifted back to the letter. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he picked it up. Tom stood in the dim glow of his living room, the rain tapping softly against the window. The letter felt heavier in his hands than it should have, just a simple envelope, yet somehow it carried an unspoken weight. For a moment he debated putting it back down. It had been a long day, and exhaustion pressed against his temples. Would it really matter if he waited one more night? Then he thought of Martha, of the way she had looked at him earlier, her voice laced with something more than just insistence. Sometimes we don't realize how much we need to hear certain words until it's almost too late. With a quiet sigh, Tom slid his finger under the flap and carefully pulled out the folded piece of paper inside. The handwriting was neat, but slightly shaky, as if the weight of years had begun to affect Martha's once steady hands. He hesitated, then began to read. "Tom, I see you. I see the exhaustion in your eyes, the way your shoulders carry a weight too heavy for one man alone. I see the way you work yourself to the bone, trying to be both a provider and a protector, all while grieving for something no one else can truly understand. I see you, Tom, and I want you to know you are not alone. When my husband was alive, he used to tell me that a man's greatest burden is not what he carries on his back, but what he keeps locked inside his heart. I think you understand that better than most. You have been running on empty for so long, trying to be everything for everyone. But even the strongest men need to rest. Even the bravest fathers need to know they are doing enough. So let me tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was younger. You are enough. You are a good man, Tom. A good father. And despite what your weary heart might tell you, you are not failing. Please take a breath. Let yourself believe that. You don't have to do this alone." Martha Tom blinked, his throat tightening. His first instinct was to shake it off, to dismiss it as just words. But something about them, the way they acknowledged everything he had never said out loud, made him feel like he had been punched in the gut. He sat down heavily on the couch, staring at the paper in his hands. He hadn't realized just how much he had needed to hear those words. Tom exhaled shakily, his gaze drifting to the framed photo on the fireplace mantel. Lisa, her warm brown eyes forever frozen in time, smiled back at him from behind the glass. It was taken on Jake's 5th birthday, the last truly happy day before the sickness took hold. Before the hospital visits, the medications, the quiet sobs behind closed doors. Before she was gone, a part of him still felt like he was stuck in that moment, still trying to pick up the pieces of a life that had shattered 2 years ago. And maybe that was why Martha's words cut so deep, because they spoke to the part of him that had never stopped feeling like he wasn't doing enough, like no matter how hard he worked, how many shifts he took, how much he tried to be both parents for Jake, it would never be enough to fill the hole Lisa left behind. But Martha, she had seen him, and she had told him the one thing he never let himself believe. You are enough. Tom clenched his jaw, a lump forming in his throat. When was the last time someone had told him that? When was the last time he had even considered? It may be never. The letter trembled slightly in his fingers as he read it again, slower this time. Something warm, something almost like relief, began to seep through the cracks of his exhaustion. He wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to keep carrying everything by himself. A quiet knock on his bedroom door pulled him from his thoughts. "Dad?" Jake's small voice came through. Tom swallowed, quickly wiping a hand over his eyes before calling out. "Yeah, buddy?" Jake pushed the door open, his hair messy from sleep. He rubbed his eyes before looking at his father curiously. "You read it, didn't you?" he asked. Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." Jake smiled sleepily. "Told you it was important." Tom huffed a small laugh. "You did." There was a pause before Jake shuffled forward and climbed onto the couch beside him. He leaned against Tom's side, small and warm, his presence grounding. "Dad? Yeah, I think you're enough too." Tom's chest tightened. He wrapped an arm around his son and held him close, pressing a kiss to the top of Jake's head. "Thanks, kid," he murmured. "That means a lot." And for the first time in years, as he sat there with his son and Martha's letter in his hands, Tom let himself believe it. Tom woke up feeling different. For the first time in what felt like years, his chest didn't feel as heavy. The exhaustion was still there, lingering beneath his bones, but something in him felt lighter, like a knot had loosened. Martha's words echoed in his mind. "You are enough." He wasn't sure if he fully believed it yet, but for the first time he wanted to try. Stretching, he glanced at the clock, 6:45 a.m. The house was still quiet. Jake wouldn't be up for another 20 minutes. Tom sat up, his eyes flickering, to the letter still resting on the coffee table. He picked it up again, running his fingers over the paper. She had seen him, understood him, and she had taken the time to write this. For him, something warm curled in his chest. Gratitude. He needed to thank her. Deciding he'd stop by her house after work, Tom got up and started his day. By 7:15 a.m., Tom was dressed and in the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee when Jake stumbled in, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, bud," Tom said, handing him a bowl of cereal. Jake yawned. "Did you sleep okay?" Tom hesitated. "Yeah, I actually did." Jake's sleepy expression softened into a smile. "Good." They ate in comfortable silence until Jake asked, "Are you going to talk to Mrs. Callahan today?" Tom nodded. "Yeah, I'll stop by after work." Jake grinned. "She'll like that." Tom smirked. "You and Martha have a secret friendship I don't know about?" Jake shrugged innocently. "She's cool." Tom chuckled, shaking his head. Of course she was. By 8 a.m., Tom was out the door, climbing into his truck for another long shift. But today, the day didn't seem as unbearable. Today, for the first time in a long time, he had something to look forward to. The day dragged on in a blur of deliveries, traffic, and heavy lifting. But despite the usual exhaustion, Tom caught himself thinking about Martha throughout the day. By late afternoon, he had made up his mind. He was going to tell her how much the letter meant to him. Maybe he'd even sit down and have coffee with her. Really talk to her. But then, around 4:30 p.m., his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, frowning at the unknown number. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered, soft yet urgent. "Is this Tom Harris?" "Yeah, who's this?" "This is Nurse Daniels from St. Luke's Hospital. I'm calling because we have a patient named Martha Callahan. She had a stroke earlier this afternoon." Tom's blood ran cold. "What? She's stable for now, but we thought you should know. Your number was listed as an emergency contact." Emergency contact. Tom felt his breath catch in his throat. He didn't even realize Martha had listed him. "Is she awake?" he asked, his voice tight. "No, but she's in good hands. You can visit her if you'd like." Tom didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." The drive to St. Luke's Hospital felt longer than it should have. Every red light, every slow driver in front of him, felt like an eternity. His grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white. His mind raced. Martha, the woman who had written him a letter that somehow saw right through him. Martha, the woman who had knocked on his door just last night, urging him to read it. Had she known? Had she felt something coming? By the time he pulled into the hospital parking lot, his pulse was pounding in his ears. He barely remembered getting out of the truck, barely remembered walking through the hospital doors until he reached the front desk. "I'm here to see Martha Callahan," he said breathlessly. The receptionist checked her system before nodding. "Room 214 down the hall to the left." Tom was already moving before she finished speaking. When Tom entered room 214, the sight of Martha in the hospital bed knocked the air from his lungs. She looked small, frail, a stark contrast to the strong, sharp-eyed woman he had seen just last night. The steady beep-beep of the heart monitor filled the quiet room. Tom swallowed hard, stepping closer. She was still, unconscious. His chest tightened. Why hadn't he read the letter sooner? Why had he waited? Now she was here, hooked up to machines, unable to hear him. He sat down beside her bed, running a hand over his face. "I was supposed to stop by your house," he murmured. His voice felt hoarse. "I was supposed to thank you," he let out, a humorless laugh shaking his head. "You wrote me something that changed my whole damn day. And I never even told you." A lump formed in his throat. "I'm sorry, Martha," he swallowed, reaching out hesitantly before finally resting his hand over hers. It was cold. His jaw clenched. He didn't like seeing her like this. Didn't like feeling helpless. For so long he had been carrying so much alone, refusing to ask for help, refusing to believe he needed it. But Martha had seen him. And now, she was lying in this hospital bed. And he didn't know if she would wake up. The thought sent a sharp pain through his chest. Tom sat there for a long time, watching the slow rise and fall of Martha's chest. He wasn't good at this, the waiting, the feeling. But he stayed. Because she had been there for him, even when he hadn't realized he needed someone. And now he would be here for her, even if all he could do was sit in silence. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Tom sat beside Martha's bed, his fingers idly tracing the edge of the hospital chair's armrest. The dim fluorescent light overhead cast a pale glow on her face, making her look even more fragile than before. How had this happened? One day she was standing in the rain, teasing him about not reading her letter. The next she was here, still unmoving, trapped in a silence that wasn't like her at all. Tom exhaled, rubbing his face with both hands. He had never been good at hospitals. Not since Lisa. The beeping monitors, the antiseptic smell, the muted whispers of doctors and nurses in the hallway. It all brought him back to the sleepless nights in the oncology ward. Back to the waiting. Back to the powerlessness. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay in the present. This is different. Martha was alive. She wasn't gone, not yet. That thought alone kept him grounded. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his gaze locked on her face. "You're gonna pull through this, Martha," he murmured. "You're tougher than you look." No response. His throat tightened. He had no idea if she could hear him, but something in him needed to say something. "Listen, He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "I read your letter." His voice came out quieter than he intended, almost uncertain. A dry chuckle escaped him. "Took me long enough, huh?" Silence. "I should have read it the second you gave it to me," he admitted. "I should have come by your house last night like I planned." He shook his head. "I don't know why I waited. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear it." He swallowed hard, glancing at her still hands. "But I needed to." His fingers curled around the hospital blanket near her wrist, gripping the fabric. "You were right, Martha," he murmured. "I've been running on empty for so damn long I didn't even realize it. I didn't even realize how much I needed to hear those words." His jaw clenched. He thought about the nights he had come home too exhausted to talk to Jake, the moments. He had questioned whether he was doing enough. How long had he been carrying this? How long had he convinced himself that struggling was just a part of survival? But Martha had seen him, and that mattered. His voice dropped to a whisper. So, thank you. Another beat of silence. Then, the smallest movement. Tom barely noticed, at first, but then Martha's fingers twitched beneath the blanket. His breath caught. He sat up straighter, his pulse quickening. "Martha!" No response, but her hand shifted again. Then, a faint rasping sound, the barest attempt at a word. Tom shot to his feet, leaning over her. "Martha, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, her breathing uneven. It was small, barely. Anything at all. But it was something. A spark of hope surged through him. He turned, quickly pressing the call button for the nurse. Seconds later, a young nurse entered the room, her eyes widening as she saw Martha stirring. "She's waking." "Up," Tom said, barely keeping the urgency from his voice. The nurse nodded, moving swiftly to check Martha's vitals. Tom stepped back, watching as her eyelids fluttered again before cracking open just slightly. Her gaze was unfocused at first, but then, slowly, it found him. And even in her weakness, she smiled. "About time." "You read it," she rasped. Tom let out a short laugh, relief washing over him like a wave. Yeah, I know." Martha's fingers twitched again, and this time Tom didn't hesitate. He reached out, wrapping his hand gently around hers. "You scared me, you know," he muttered. She blinked slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't mean to," Tom smirked. "Well, you did." Martha exhaled a weak chuckle, her smile soft. "But you're here." His throat tightened. He swallowed. "Yeah." She squeezed his hand, just barely, but enough. Enough to let him know she understood. Enough to remind him that some things were worth holding on to. The tension in Tom's chest eased slightly as Martha's frail fingers rested in his. She was awake. Barely, but awake. The nurse checked her vitals, speaking in a calm, professional tone. "Her blood pressure is stabilizing. That's a good sign." Tom barely registered the words. His attention was fixed on Martha. Her face was still pale, her lips dry, but her eyes, though tired, held that same quiet strength he had come to admire. "See?" she rasped. "Not done yet." Tom exhaled, his smirk barely covering the relief in his voice. "Didn't doubt you for a second." Martha gave him a knowing look. "Okay, fine. Maybe I did," he admitted. Just a little, a weak chuckle. Escaped her, but it quickly turned into a wince. Tom's grip on her hand tightened just slightly. "Don't push yourself." Martha's eyes softened, and she gave him the faintest nod. The nurse adjusted her IV drip. "She needs rest, but this is promising. If she continues improving, we'll monitor her for another few days before considering discharge." Discharge? Tom let out a slow breath. She was going to be okay. The thought settled deep in his chest, replacing the panic that had gripped him since the moment he got the call. "Thanks," he said to the nurse. The woman smiled warmly before turning to Martha. "Get some rest, Ms. Callahan. You gave us all quite a scare." Martha's gaze flickered back to Tom. "Did I?" His jaw tensed. "Yeah, you did." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then softly, Martha said, "Guess I owe you an apology." Tom frowned. "For what?" "For worrying you." Tom huffed. "That's a first. Usually it's the other way around." A weak smile played at Martha's lips. "You do have a habit of keeping things bottled up." Tom sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, guess I do." Martha studied him, her gaze both knowing and gentle. "And now?" Tom hesitated. What had changed? For so long, he had carried everything alone. The grief, the exhaustion, the guilt of not being enough. For Jake, for Lisa, for himself. But then Martha had seen him, really seen him, and now he wasn't sure if he could go back to pretending none of it mattered. He exhaled. "Now, I don't know." He glanced down at their joined hands. But maybe I don't want to keep doing it alone. Martha's fingers squeezed his. Just barely, but enough. That's a start, she whispered. By the time Tom left the hospital, the sky had darkened, and the air had taken on a crisp chill. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself as he walked toward his truck, Martha's words replaying in his mind. You don't have to do this alone. He slid into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel, staring out into the quiet parking lot. How long had he tried to do it all alone? He thought about Lisa, about the way he had shut out the world after she died, how he had thrown himself into work, convinced that if he just worked harder, provided more, he could fill the void she left behind. But no amount of overtime had brought her back, and no amount of denial had made the loneliness disappear. A vibration in his pocket pulled him from his thoughts. Jake. Dad. Is Mrs. Callahan okay? Tom smiled faintly, quickly typing a reply. Yeah, kid, she's gonna be okay. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, Jake. You coming home soon? Tom hesitated. Then he typed, yeah, be there soon. As he drove home, the letter Martha had given him sat in the passenger seat beside him. He didn't need to read it again. He already knew the words by heart. Jake was waiting in the living room when Tom walked in, a blanket wrapped around his small frame. The glow from the television flickered across his face, but he looked up as soon as Tom entered. She's really okay? Jake asked. Tom nodded, hanging up his jacket. Yeah, buddy. She woke up. Jake let out a breath of relief, his shoulders relaxing. Good. Tom sat down beside him on the couch, resting his elbows on his knees. You were worried? Jake shrugged, but his face gave him away. Tom sighed, running a hand over his face. I get it, I was too. Jake hesitated, then shifted closer. Dad. Yeah? You don't talk about Mom much. Tom's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to stay still. No, I don't. Jake studied him, his young eyes filled with an understanding beyond his years. You can, you know. Tom swallowed hard. Lisa's absence was something he felt every single day, but talking about her, that was something he had never known how to do. He had spent so much time trying to protect Jake from his own grief that he had never stopped to wonder if Jake needed to talk about it too. Tom exhaled slowly. What do you remember most about her? He asked. Jake's face lit up, and for the next 15 minutes he really talked about Lisa, about the way she laughed, the way she always danced in the kitchen, the way she used to tuck him in at night with a different bedtime story every time. And Tom listened, really listened. For the first time in 2 years, the silence between them wasn't heavy, and for the first time in 2 years, Tom let himself miss her out loud. A few days later, Tom found himself walking down the hospital corridor toward room 214, a small paper bag in his hand. He had been here every day since Martha's stroke, making sure she wasn't alone. But today was different. Today she was finally awake and talking again. The nurse at the front desk had called earlier that morning to let him know she was doing better than expected, and that she had been asking for him. As he reached the doorway, he took a deep breath before stepping. Inside, Martha was sitting up in bed, her silver hair brushed neatly, a soft woolen shawl draped over her shoulders. The color had returned to her cheeks, and when she turned to look at him, her sharp blue eyes twinkled with their usual mischief. Well, she said, her voice still a bit raspy but steady. Took you long enough. Tom smirked, holding up the paper bag. I come bearing gifts. Martha raised an eyebrow. Tell me it's not hospital food. Better. He pulled out a small cup. Cinnamon-spiced coffee from Marlowe's diner. Her lips curled into a knowing smile. Ah, you remembered. Tom shrugged, setting the cup on her tray. You. Don't shut up about how much better it is than the coffee at home. Martha chuckled, carefully reaching for the cup. Hospital coffee tastes like wet cardboard. This is a significant improvement. Tom sat down in the chair beside her bed, watching as she took a slow sip. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then softly she said, I scared you, didn't I? Tom exhaled, rubbing his hands together. Yeah, you did. Martha nodded, as if she had expected that answer. I wasn't sure I'd wake up this time. His chest tightened. Don't say that. It's the truth, Tom. She studied him for a long moment. We don't always get second chances. Something about the way she said it made him uneasy. Martha set the coffee down and folded her hands in her lap. Can I tell you something? Tom nodded. She leaned back against her pillows, her gaze distant. I've spent a lot of time thinking about my life these past few days. About the people I've loved, the people I've lost, and the things I wish I had done differently. Tom stayed silent, sensing that she needed to say this. Martha inhaled slowly. I lost my husband when I was just a little older than you. He was in the war. And when he died, She hesitated. I let grief swallow me whole. I spent years keeping people at a distance, afraid of losing them. I thought if I just existed quietly, maybe life wouldn't take anything else from me. Tom swallowed hard. He understood that feeling all too well. Martha gave him a small, sad smile. It took me a long time to realize that shutting people out doesn't protect you from pain. It just keeps you lonely. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. I don't want you to make the same mistake, Tom. His throat felt tight. He didn't know what to say. Martha squeezed his hand again. Lisa wouldn't want that for you. The mention of his wife made his chest ache. For years, he had told himself that in keeping his head down, focusing on work, avoiding emotions, that was the only way to keep moving forward. But what if moving forward wasn't just about surviving? What if it was about living? The room was quiet, filled only with the distant hum of hospital machines. Martha's words sat heavy in Tom's chest. He thought about Jake, about how much his son had grown up in silence, watching his father bury himself in work, watching him hold back his grief, watching him exist but never really live. Had he been teaching Jake the same thing Martha had once believed? That shutting the world out was safer? Tom ran a hand down his face. I don't know how. Martha tilted her head. How to what? He hesitated, then admitted, how to stop just surviving. Martha's expression softened. You start small. Tom exhaled, rubbing his thumb over his knuckles. What if I don't know how to do anything else? Martha smiled knowingly. Then let someone show you. Later that afternoon, after saying goodbye to Martha, Tom drove straight to pick up Jake from school. His son climbed into the truck, stuffing his backpack onto the floor. Hey, Dad. Hey, kid. Tom turned onto the road. How was school? Jake shrugged. Okay. Tom nodded, his fingers tightening slightly around the steering wheel. A part of him wanted to ask, do you think I've been doing this all wrong? Have I let you down? But instead he said, what do you say we go out for dinner tonight? Jake blinked at him. Like not takeout? Tom smirked. Yeah, like actually sit down at a restaurant. Jake's eyes lit up with genuine surprise. Really? Really, Jake grinned. Okay, can we go to Louie's Diner? They have the best pancakes. Tom chuckled. Pancakes for dinner? Why not? Jake shrugged. You said we could eat out. Tom shook his head with a small smile. All right, pancakes it is. Jake beamed, and for the first time in a long time, Tom felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't failing as much as he thought. Martha's hospital discharge was scheduled for Friday morning, and Tom made sure he was there. By the time he arrived, she was already dressed in a knitted cardigan and a pair of comfortable slacks, looking more like herself than she had in days. The hospital room felt oddly empty now that the machines were turned off, and the IV stand had been removed. You ready to get out of here? Tom asked, leaning against the doorframe. Martha looked up from the bag she was packing and smirked. More than ready, Tom chuckled. Yeah, I figured. Hospital food will do that to you, Martha snorted. That, and I'm tired of people fussing over me. Besides, she added with a twinkle in her eye, I have something I need to give. You? Tom frowned. What, another letter? Martha smiled. Exactly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a neatly folded envelope. This time his name was written in her familiar old-fashioned cursive just like before. Tom took the letter slowly, running his thumb over the edges. "You had this ready?" Martha nodded. "I wrote it before the stroke. Just hadn't found the right time to give it to you." His stomach twisted slightly. The last letter she gave him had changed everything. What could possibly be in this one? Tom helped Martha into his truck, adjusting her seatbelt before shutting the door. As he slid into the driver's seat, he glanced at the envelope on the dashboard. It felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. Martha noticed his hesitation and chuckled. "Relax, Tom. It's not a will." Tom smirked. "Yeah, well, the last time you gave me a letter, it kinda messed me up." Martha laughed, a genuine hearty sound. "Good. That means you actually listened." Tom shook his head but didn't argue. As he pulled out of the hospital parking lot, the radio hummed softly in the background. The streets were quiet, the late morning sun filtering through the windshield. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then, Martha broke the silence. "You know, Tom, I've been thinking a lot about second chances." Tom glanced at her. "Yeah?" She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "Most people think second chances come in big, dramatic ways, like getting saved at the last second or having some life-changing revelation." She exhaled. "But sometimes, second chances are quiet, small, like a letter, or a cup of coffee, or a fence that someone takes the time to fix." Tom's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. Martha smiled softly. "We don't always realize when we're being given another chance, but I think you're starting to see yours." Tom swallowed, staring straight ahead. He thought about Jake, about pancakes for dinner, about the nights where he actually let himself miss Lisa instead of just burying the grief. And yeah, maybe Martha was right. Maybe he had been given a second chance. The question was, what was he going to do with it? After dropping Martha off at her house and making sure she was settled, Tom sat in his truck staring at the envelope. He should just open it. Rip it open, read whatever she wrote, and get it over with. But something in him hesitated, because he knew whatever was in here was going to mean something. With a quiet breath, he tore the top and unfolded the letter. Martha's handwriting was as steady as ever. "Tom, I don't know when you'll read this, but if I know you at all, you'll probably wait too long. That's all right. I'm patient. I wanted to write this, 'cause I see something in you that you refuse to see in yourself. You think you're just a man getting by, a father trying to do his best, a worker punching in and out, carrying the weight of everything alone. But Tom, you are more than that. You are a man who still has a life ahead of him. You are a father who deserves to enjoy his son, not just provide for him. And you are a person who is allowed to want more. You don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to keep living like survival is the only thing that matters. You're allowed to hope again. I hope this letter finds you on a day where you actually believe that. But if not, well, I'll keep reminding you." Tom exhaled slowly, staring at the words until they blurred. Hope. It was such a simple thing, but it had felt impossible for so long. And yet, here was someone who believed in him. Maybe it was time he started believing in himself, too. That evening, Tom sat at the kitchen table, tapping his fingers against the wood. The letter lay beside him. His thoughts felt different, lighter. Jake sat across from him, working on a math worksheet. Every so often he'd glance up, probably sensing that his dad was thinking about something big. Finally, Jake spoke. "Dad?" Tom blinked, pulled from his thoughts. "Yeah? You okay?" Tom looked at his son, the kid who had spent 2 years watching him go through the motions, and suddenly he knew what he had to do. "I think it's time for a change," he said quietly. Jake's brows furrowed. "What kind of change?" Tom exhaled. "A good one." Because for the first time in years he wanted more, and maybe, just maybe, he was ready to start living again. For the first time in a long time, Tom felt like he was at a crossroads. Martha's second letter had unlocked something inside him, something he had buried under years of exhaustion, grief, and the belief that all he could do was survive. But surviving wasn't the same as living, and maybe it was time to start choosing differently. The following morning, after dropping Jake off at school, Tom sat in his truck, staring at the worn-out delivery uniform he had been wearing for nearly a decade, the same routine, the same long hours, the same exhaustion that never seemed to go away. He reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a crumpled business card, a card he had been given a few months ago, but never had the courage to use. David Reynolds, hiring manager, Henderson. Son's auto repair. It was a better job, better pay, better hours, less physical strain, which meant more energy for Jake. But more than that, it was something he actually enjoyed. Tom had always been good with cars. He used to fix them with his dad before life got complicated, before Lisa got sick, before everything else took over. He had told himself it wasn't the right time when the job was first offered. But maybe now it was. Before he could overthink it, Tom grabbed his phone and dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice. Then, hello? Tom cleared his throat. Hey, David, it's Tom Harris. We met a few months ago. You said to give you a call if I ever change my mind about that job. A pause. Then, well, David chuckled. Didn't think I'd hear from you. Tom exhaled. Yeah, well, I think I'm ready for something different. Another pause. Then, David's voice warmed. You still got the skills? Tom smirked. I can turn a wrench if that's what you're asking. David laughed. Good enough for me. How about you come in this Friday? We'll talk. Tom's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Yeah, I'd like that. He hung up and let out a slow breath. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving forward. That afternoon, after work, Tom stopped by Martha's house. She was sitting on her porch, a knitted blanket draped over her lap, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She smiled when she saw him. You look like a man with something on his mind. Tom smirked, stepping onto the porch. Maybe I do. Martha patted the chair beside her. Well, let's hear it. He sat down, rubbing his hands together before finally saying, I called about a new job today. Martha's eyes twinkled. Oh? Tom nodded. It's at a repair shop. Nothing fancy, but it pays better. And the hours are normal. More. Time with Jake. Martha studied him for a long moment. And how do you feel about that? Tom exhaled. Like I should have done it sooner. Martha chuckled. Funny how we always realize that after we make the change. Tom smirked, shaking his head. Yeah, funny. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Martha spoke again. You know, I was thinking about something. Tom arched a brow. Oh boy. Martha laughed. No, really. I was thinking about how much you've changed these past few months. Tom frowned. I don't know if I've changed that much. Martha gave him a knowing look. Tom, when I met you, you were a man running on fumes. Now you're making changes. You're showing up, you're letting people in. She paused, her voice softer. That's growth. Tom swallowed. He didn't know why her words hit him so hard, but they did. He wasn't fixed. He wasn't suddenly a whole new person, but he wasn't the same man he had been either, and that meant something. That evening, Tom and Jake sat on the couch, watching an old sci-fi movie. Jake had his feet tucked under him, his eyes glued to the screen, but Tom's mind was elsewhere. After a while, he spoke. Hey, bud? Jake looked up. Yeah? Tom hesitated, then said, What would you think if I took a new job? One where I'd be home more? Jake's eyes widened. Really? Tom nodded. Yeah. Jake grinned. That'd be awesome. Tom chuckled. Yeah. Jake nodded enthusiastically. That means you could actually help me with my science project, and maybe, he hesitated, maybe we could do something together this weekend? Tom's chest tightened. He had missed so much. He ruffled Jake's hair. Yeah, kid, I think that sounds like a good idea. And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. Friday morning arrived, and Tom stood outside his boss's office at the delivery warehouse. The familiar scent of motor oil, cardboard, and coffee lingered in the air. For nearly a decade, this place had been his life. Early mornings, late nights, overtime shifts that stole moments from Jake, all in the name of providing. But today was different. Tom exhaled, gripping the resignation letter in his hand. He had debated telling his boss in person, but after so many years, it felt right to put it in writing. With a final deep breath, he stepped inside. His manager, Carl McDaniels, was an older man with graying hair and tired eyes, seated behind a cluttered desk. He looked up when Tom entered. "Morning, Harris, what brings you in?" Tom cleared his throat, setting the letter on Carl's desk. Carl frowned. "What's this?" Tom exhaled. "My resignation." The older man stared at him for a moment before leaning back in his chair. "Didn't think I'd ever see this day." "Yeah, well, it was time." Carl rubbed his chin. "I won't lie, Tom. You've been one of the hardest workers here. You sure about this?" Tom nodded. "I am." Carl studied him, then let out a slow sigh. "All right. I won't try to change your mind." He offered his hand. "Good luck." "Harris, you deserve better than this place." Tom shook his hand. "Thanks, Carl." As he walked out of the office, relief settled deep in his chest. For the first time in years, he wasn't leaving this place exhausted. He was leaving free. The following Monday, Tom arrived at Henderson & Sons Auto Repair for his first day on the job. The smell of motor oil, the hum of engines, the sound of tools clanking against metal. It was different from his old job, but in a way that felt right. David, his new boss, handed him a set of coveralls. "Welcome to the team, Harris. Ready to get your hands dirty?" Tom smirked, slipping the coveralls over his clothes. Always. For the first time in years, he enjoyed his work. He wasn't just pushing through the hours. He was learning, building, fixing. And the best part? When his shift ended, he went home to Jake, not to collapse from exhaustion, not to drown in silence, but to be present. A week later, Tom found himself sitting across from Martha at her kitchen table. She sipped her cinnamon-spiced coffee, eyeing him with her usual knowing gaze. "You look different," Tom chuckled. "Yeah," Martha nodded. "Lighter, happier." Tom exhaled, swirling his own coffee. "It's been good, being home more, spending time with Jake, and the new job. It's not just a paycheck. I actually like it." Martha smiled. "That's what I wanted to hear," Tom smirked. "You gonna take credit for it?" She raised an eyebrow. "Absolutely." They both laughed, but then Martha's expression turned serious. "There's one more thing." Tom frowned. "What's that?" Martha set her cup down, folding her hands in front of her. "I want you to write a letter." Tom blinked. "A letter?" She nodded. "Like the one I wrote you." Tom rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know if I'm the writing letters kind of guy." Martha chuckled. "Neither was I. But words matter, Tom, and you know that now." Tom exhaled, looking down at his coffee. "Who would I even write to?" Martha smiled softly. "Someone who needs to hear what you needed to hear." The thought sat heavy in Tom's chest, because he did know someone who was just like him. A single father, tired, lost, convinced he wasn't doing enough. And maybe, just maybe, Tom had something to say to him. That night, after Jake went to bed, Tom sat at the kitchen table staring at a blank sheet of paper. He tapped the pen against the wood, feeling the weight of what he was about to do. Then, finally, he started writing. "I see you. I know what it's like to be exhausted, before the sun even rises, to work hours that steal time from the people you love, because you think that's the only way to take care of them. I know what it's like to carry everything alone, but you are not failing. You are enough. I didn't believe it when someone told me that once. But I hope you do, because it's true. You don't have to keep surviving. You are allowed to start living again. And if no one else has told you this today, I believe in you." Tom stared at the words, his chest tightening. Then, with a slow breath, he folded the letter and set it aside. Tomorrow he would find a way to pass it on, because kindness wasn't meant to end with him. It was meant to keep going. The letter sat on the kitchen counter for 2 days. Tom wasn't sure why he hesitated. Maybe it was because he still wasn't used to the idea of his words making a difference. Maybe it was because a part of him still doubted that a simple letter could mean something. But then he remembered Martha, and how her words had changed everything. So on the 3rd morning, as he was getting Jake ready for school, Tom slipped the folded letter into his pocket. He didn't know who would receive it yet, but he knew it needed to find the right person. Later that afternoon, after work, Tom stopped by a local coffee shop, not Marlowe's, but a smaller one near the repair shop. As he waited for his order, he noticed a man sitting alone near the window. He was about Tom's age, but he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped forward, his gaze fixed on the phone in his hands, scrolling mindlessly. Tom knew that look. He had worn that look, and suddenly, he knew. This was the person who needed the letter. Tom hesitated for a brief second before pulling it from his pocket. He scribbled something quickly on the outside, for when you need it. Then, as he picked up his coffee, he walked past the man's table and placed the letter next to him. The man blinked, startled, looking up just as Tom nodded. "Take care, man." And with that, Tom walked out. His heart was pounding. Would the guy read it? Would it matter? He didn't know. But maybe that wasn't the point. That evening, just as Tom was getting ready to sit down for dinner with Jake, his phone buzzed. He saw the number and felt his stomach twist. St. Luke's Hospital. His chest tightened. "Martha," he quickly answered. "Hello?" A familiar voice, Nurse Daniels. "Tom, I'm calling about Martha Callahan. She had another episode this afternoon. She's stable, but she's asking for you." Tom was already reaching for his jacket. "I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, Tom was at Martha's bedside. She looked tired, more than before. Her hands rested weakly on the blankets, her breathing slower. But when she saw him, she smiled. "Hey, kid," she whispered. Tom sat beside her, forcing a smirk. "Didn't I tell you to stop scaring me like this?" Martha let out a small chuckle. "What can I say? Keeps you on your toes." Tom swallowed past the lump in his throat. "You're gonna be okay." She studied him, her gaze soft but knowing. "Tom," she said gently, "you know better than to make promises you can't keep." His chest ached. He didn't want to hear this, but she reached for his hand, squeezing it weakly. "I'm not afraid." Tom's jaw tightened. "I don't want to lose you, Martha." Martha smiled, her eyes warm. "You won't." Tom frowned. "That's not how this works." Martha shook her head. "No, listen to me." She took a slow breath. "The people we love, the ones who change us, they never really leave." She gave his hand another gentle squeeze. "I will always be here." Tom closed his eyes briefly, forcing himself to breathe. Then finally he nodded. "Yeah," he whispered. "I know." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then, softly, Martha said, "I'm proud of you, Tom." Tom swallowed hard. "For what?" "For choosing to live again." His throat felt tight, but he managed a small smile. "Well, you kind of forced me into it." Martha chuckled, but it was weaker this time. "You were always strong enough. You just needed someone to remind you." Tom looked at her, memorizing everything, the kindness in her eyes, the way she had always seen him, even when he couldn't see himself. "Thank you, Martha," he said quietly, "for everything." Martha's eyes twinkled with warmth. "It was always my pleasure." She exhaled slowly, her eyelids growing heavier. "Rest," Tom whispered. "I'll be here." Martha smiled one last time before closing her eyes, and Tom sat beside her, holding her hand just as she had done for him when he needed it most. The morning of Martha's funeral was crisp and cool, the autumn leaves whispering in the breeze as Tom stood in front of a small gathering of friends and neighbors. The churchyard was quiet, except for the occasional rustling of trees and the Murmurs of those who had come to say goodbye. Tom had never liked funerals. They reminded him too much of loss, of things left unsaid. But today was different. Today wasn't just about saying goodbye. It was about remembering. It was about honoring someone who had changed him in ways he never expected. And it was about carrying her legacy forward. After the service, Tom stayed behind, standing near Martha's grave as people slowly filtered out. He wasn't ready to leave yet. Jake stood beside him, his small hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. He looked up at his father. She was really special, huh? Tom swallowed past the lump in his throat. Yeah, kid, she was. Jake hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. I wrote her a letter, he said shyly. Tom's breath caught. Jake knelt down, placing a folded piece of paper near the headstone. He ran his fingers over the cold stone before whispering, "Thanks for helping my dad." Tom's chest tightened. Jake stood, turning to his father. "I think she'd like that, don't you?" Tom smiled, ruffling Jake's hair. "Yeah, buddy, I think she'd love it." They stood in silence for a moment longer before Tom exhaled. "Come on, let's go home." As they walked away, the wind carried the sound of rustling leaves as if whispering a quiet farewell. And somehow, Tom knew she was still with him. A week passed. Life moved forward, but something about it felt different now. Lighter. Tom found himself noticing things more. The way Jake laughed when they made breakfast together. The way the sun hit the porch in the mornings. The way his new job didn't feel like just a job, but something he actually enjoyed. And then one evening, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived in the mail. Tom almost dismissed it as another bill, but when he turned it over, his breath caught. It wasn't from the bank, or the repair shop, or some company asking for money. It was from the man in the coffee shop, the one Tom had left his letter for. Hands slightly unsteady, he opened it. "Tom, I don't know who you are, but I needed to thank you. I was having the worst day of my life when I found your letter. My wife left last month. I lost my job 2 weeks ago. And that morning at the coffee shop, I was sitting there wondering if there was even a reason to keep going. Then I saw your letter, and when I read it, I cried. Right there in the middle of the damn coffee shop. Because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. Someone, a stranger in Ibis, saw me. Your words saved me in ways I don't think you'll ever understand. So thank you. I hope someday I can pass this kindness forward, just like you did for me." Tom sat there, the letter trembling in his hands. He let out a slow breath, blinking back the sting in his eyes. Then he smiled. Because Martha had been right. The people we love never really leave. They stay in the lessons they taught us, in the kindness they passed down, in the small, unexpected moments where their presence is felt, even if they're gone. And just like that, her legacy lived on. Not just through him, but through the kindness she had inspired. And as Tom sat there, staring at the letter, he made a silent promise. He would keep passing it on, because that's what Martha would have wanted. And because, for the first time in a long time, he finally understood what it meant to truly live. So what do you think? Have you ever experienced a moment where a small act of kindness changed everything for you? Or maybe, just maybe, you've been someone's Martha without even realizing it. Let's keep this conversation going. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts, your experiences, or even just the one piece of advice you think someone out there needs to hear today. Because sometimes, a few simple words can make all the difference. If this story moved you, if reminded you of something real, raw, and deeply human, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. This isn't just a place for stories. It's a place for connection, for meaning, for reminders of the good that still exists in the world. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. So go ahead, subscribe, turn on notifications, and be part of this journey with us. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for being part of this moment with me. Because at the end of the day, stories like these aren't just meant to be heard, they're meant to be shared. Until next time, stay kind, stay connected, and keep believing in the power of simple words. See you in the next one.